Hi guys, and welcome to Studio 3 Hollywood's Conversations with Tysha edition. Today we have a very special guest that has invited us out to their home in Malibu to talk about the problematic situation in our federal criminal justice system. We will share with you a very, very inspiring story that started out very unfortunate but has ended with a fortunate mission to help other people. This story is a prime example of courage, and when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Back in the 90s, Amy Ralston Povah's case was an outrage. It gained major media coverage from major publications like Glamour magazine, Court TV, and the Associated Press, and many more. Her case specifically gained a lot of momentum, pointing and aiming direction towards a law that is known as very controversial. The conspiracy law, also known as the guilty by association law. Everybody, please help me in welcoming Amy Ralston Povah.
Thank you, Tysha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes. This has been a long time coming, guys. This woman is busy. And we've had trying to coordinate dates and get us together when you're not in town doing all you do for other people. And it's been amazing, and we're so honored here at Studio 3 Hollywood, Conversations with Tysha, to have you on to really, I want to say, we're going to be really diving in, and what better person than someone so close to a situation themselves that has knowledge and information that really is what it says, but the general public just does not have the knowledge to understand, the adverse effects and what this really means, in our human right and lives of freedom, and what our true justice system is actually speaking and supposed to protect. That is not being that way. So right. I definitely want to give you the floor. I think that your story is amazing, and it really just continues to go on with the legacy that you're creating with how you move forward helping other people. So please, because I know you personally now, I got the inside scoop and I'm so honored, but please kind of give us a little bit of your story and how you've come to the place and the position that you are now.
Well, yeah, it's been a long journey and education process that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Mm-hmm. But in 1989, I pulled into my garage in the Hollywood Hills, and I was rushed by, back then it wasn't people in SWAT, they had on cowboy hats and plain clothes, so I thought I was being robbed. And they had guns out and were screaming at me to, hands up, don't move. Controversial. That's like which one is it? So anyway, they flanked me and took me into the house, and my house was being ransacked by about 10 federal agents, and they had to put a chair upright, tossed me in it, and then the grueling process began of telling me that I was in hot water. They knew that my husband had been arrested in Germany. They wanted my cooperation, and if I didn't cooperate, I was looking at 20 to life for conspiracy. And I just didn't even know what that meant. Mm-hmm. And if anyone can even understand when you think you're just driving up to your home, mm-hmm. and then you're within minutes, you're in your home and it's being completely ransacked. Stuff was all over my kitchen floor. There were people in there. They were throwing stuff. Things were crashing and breaking, and there were people in the lower part of my home that I could hear banging and
they had given you no information at that point as to why they were there?
No, other than initially they started off with saying, your husband is incarcerated in Germany. We know you visited him. So pretty quickly I knew that this was associated with his arrest, but you just freeze. Now that may work on some people. I know that, and I see stories and I read stories all the time where they try strong arm tactics and people start singing like crazy. Mm-hmm. It was the exact opposite for me. Mm-hmm. I was just traumatized. I was clammed up. I don't know if being an Aries has anything to do with it. But
I mean, I think that's a very intense situation for anybody to be in that moment. So like, who's to say your reaction is
right? It's
valid?
just
Yeah.
It was the opposite of what would work with me, as opposed to somebody being professional and knocking on the door and coming in and saying, we have a few questions, we'd like to talk to you. I probably would have sat and talked with them and not have clammed up the way that I did. But regardless, I just kind of focused on my feet and tried to zero in to shut out all the stimulus. He's now my ex-husband, of course, but in '88, I moved to Los Angeles because I had left him already 2 times before. We had separated, and he is very manipulative. He was the kind of person that would beg me to stay. He would change. He would quit drinking. I was only 24 when I met him. Well, by this time, when I left him, I was 27, going on 28. But I had come to realize that he was just far more sophisticated than I was in his ability to get me to stay in the relationship based on the fact that he would change, guilt trips, marital vows. My parents would have never divorced. I was raised in a community where very few of the people I went to school with, their parents ever divorced. So it really hit a chord with me. So that said, a year after I moved to Los Angeles, and I was dating other people, he still wanted a reconciliation. He
pursued, yeah.
Flew out all the time, sent me flowers, would pop in. And I was becoming weak, but I had just always said, let's just be friends. And that was a mistake. I wished I had just divorced him when I left him. And after the last time that we were having communications and he was out in Los Angeles, he had a new company called InterServe. He was going over to Germany. It had to do with bringing people who were nurses and in the medical field to the United States. I think it was legitimate, but regardless, he was going to Europe a lot. I knew that. So the next thing I knew, around February of '89, he was arrested in Germany. And he reached out to me and asked me to please help him, to please come visit him. And regrettably, I did. I really kind of threw caution to the wind, but back then I had no clue that we had laws in this country that if you are the spouse or the girlfriend of somebody, even associated loosely with somebody who's in the drug trade, that any little thing that you do, including passing a phone message to someone or driving somebody somewhere in your car, it only takes one overt act. That's the way the conspiracy law is explained, one overt act. So if you advance the conspiracy one step, you're guilty for everything that everybody else has done. Now, that was back in '89. They have altered it over the years and put a few safeguards in place, because they said somebody who enters the conspiracy at the tail end shouldn't be held responsible for things at the inception of the conspiracy. But when I got sacked and so many women that I'm trying to help, we were held responsible for everything. And any change in the law, they did not make retroactive. So it was kind of salt in the wound for those of us who were serving time, that they acknowledged that it was maybe being a little too abusive. So
and so to now, how long were you in federal care?
Well, I was arrested 2 years. They harassed me, trying to get me to cooperate. And they have incredible ways to drive a steer right into the slaughterhouse. They go and talk to your employers. They tell people that I'm at the center of an investigation of big drug dealers. They imply to everyone that I am a drug dealer. And before you know it, your friends and employers are basically looking at you like, can you just go away?
Yeah, because they don't want you. They don't even want to be a part or in the
yeah.
mix
They
now.
just and they have a way of saying we can make your life miserable too. We can audit. Why are you associating with her? Maybe you're involved in this too. I mean, they just really have a way of alienating you and ostracizing you from your employment, your friends.
Yeah.
They came out to seize the
And then
car.
again, it seems like it's going leading to the position that you're guilty until you're proven innocent. It's not the other way around, which is what we are told, and we as the general public and American citizens stand on that. And so your experience is very tragic.
Well, and
you said 24?
no, I was 24 when I met
Okay.
Sandy Povah. That's the person who ended up being the kingpin in this. He got involved in ecstasy. We haven't said what it was. It was ecstasy. And he got involved in it, was interested in it when it was legal. It became illegal a few years after when I met him, apparently he was already involved in this, but he shielded me from the big picture. I knew he could get ecstasy, but I didn't know that the scope of what he was doing. So it became illegal, but apparently he already had invested a lot of money into having it manufactured in Guatemala and over in Germany, and he didn't stop after it became illegal. So conspiracy kind of ensnares. There's very little to protect anyone. And I think that's what the viewers need to understand. There's really not much between you and a prison cell in the event the government decides to go after someone, or if you know somebody who is under investigation and they flip them, that person merely has to start incriminating other people, sometimes even go and set up people who weren't involved, but there's lots of cases in prison where somebody was talked into, please, you have a connection.
Are they, is this something that they forced them to be in for a long time, or is it only for that case, or is it now like they are desiring the person to cooperate with them indefinitely?
Well, there's something from column A, column B, and column C, because there's different scenarios. Sometimes a prosecutor will just have somebody working within a particular case, like they wanted me. They wanted information on my husband, but he couldn't do his own dirty work. He was over in Germany, so they thought I was a valuable asset that could infiltrate his organization over here. But there's plenty of cases where somebody is told, go out and set up some cases for us, and they will target. I did time with a woman who was a bartender, and this guy just kept pestering her, and then he, you're so beautiful, and then they started dating, and she fell in love with him, and he hammered her because he didn't want to send his people into prison, his connections. And he set her up when she finally got a connection for him, and and then she found out the whole time he was an informant.
Wow.
And that's really going on a lot there,
yeah.
Where you don't
hear
even
about
know
that.
who you're meeting, and if somebody's pressuring you to do something, it could very well be that person is, on that pyramid scheme where they're going to send you in so they can stay out of prison, which is ugly.
Which, now that you mention that was a very alarming response that I read about your case, and the person that's actually guilty of the crime and the many accounts that they are being, that will be charged to, they get, for cooperating, they get a lesser sentence, or sometimes no sentence, probation. So in your case, your ex-husband got 3 months probation.
3 years.
3 years probation.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3 years probation.
From the same judge who gave me 24 years. And so, and the thing about conspiracy that everybody needs to understand is that when they approach you and say, we want you to cooperate. I have had plenty of people say to me, why wouldn't you cooperate? They don't know what cooperation means. Cooperation does not mean confessing what you did. That is not cooperation. They want you to debrief, cooperate, and you will not get a sentence reduction unless you give, what is it called? Something assistance, where you have to help them, you have to aid them in the conviction of other people. So it's contingent on you having to provide additional information and testify against other people if they don't go ahead and also cooperate. So it's I wasn't willing to wear wires or just play this game where you kind of have to sell your soul in order to get a sentence reduction. And we can debate that all day long. I think there's situations where it may be appropriate for some people in that situation. It wasn't something that I was going to do. I just wasn't going to do that. And I even felt like, if you've got to send me to prison, then just go ahead and send me to prison. I'll figure it out once I get there.
That is so crazy.
Little did I know I would spend 9 years in prison.
To adjust, and what was your life after this experience?
Well, to back up just a little bit, when I was in federal prison, I exhausted my appeals, and then I only had one option left, and that was clemency. And so I wrote my clemency petition. There was an attorney that wanted to help me who was willing to work pro bono, and he was wonderful. Glamour Magazine, David France, he's now an Oscar-nominated documentarian. But back then he saw my story, thank God, because the conspiracy laws are so convoluted, nobody can really understand, because it's the United States versus about 20 people, and then everybody's just sort of pointing fingers, and nobody's going to go through your transcripts, nobody's going to look to see. So 2 senators from Arkansas, when the Glamour Magazine article came out, really devoted themselves to my story, my case. A lot of organizations helped. I have so many people to be thankful. There was a massive letter writing campaign. 16 politicians supported my clemency. Court TV, as you said, did a piece on it. Other media started reporting on my story. And so on July 7th, 2000, my case manager called me in, and she was in a state of, she was kind of stressful. And the first question was, she said, "Where are you going to live?" And I thought that was strange, and I said, what do you mean? And she said, when you get out, where are you going to live? And I said, well, I guess with my parents. What, why? And she said, you've just gotten executive clemency. I've got to have you out of here by 5 o'clock. I've got to set you up on probation. And so that's how I found out.
How did that feel? In that moment, can you remember those emotions, like the thought, like?
Yes, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I remember leaving her office and screaming at the top of my lungs, I mean, it reverberated through, we have common areas, and then doors started opening, and people were like, what's going on? And I just started screaming to my best friend, and she came out, and it was a wonderful day, because we never had very much good news in the air. We always used to get bad news. So the fact that they hadn't had me out that day, I wouldn't have it any other way, because I literally was on the freeway that same day, driving, and it was the freeway that I used to sit in the law library and watch. I could see the cars, and I always used to just think, where's everybody going? When am I ever going to find myself out there? And there I was. But I think I suffer from PTSD from popping out like that without having time to process it, because I have nightmares all the time. I have nightmares that I'm getting out, and then they come to me and they say, you stepped across the line, you've got to start your time all over again. And it's repetitive, or somebody's setting me up, or I can't move from point A to point B. So there is, some, trauma there. But again, I don't think I would have it any other way. Then,
how did sorry to cut you off, but since we're on that point, that topic, I want to expand, what was the first initiative or step that you took in order to gain clemency and to get your word out and to start having people talk about it and get that ball rolling? Like, if someone's in a situation trying to figure out, I don't really know my next step, I know in there you probably have created friends that probably will be family for life, just for the experience that you've gone through. So I'm sure leaving some of those people behind was very, very difficult, which will bring us to something else a little later that I'm super excited about, and which is how I know you. But what gets the ball rolling in that direction to get the word out and really get people to understanding and rally behind an injustice situation?
Well, first of all, I was obsessive. And people on the compound that I'm friends with today, a lot of people who are still out, even talk about it. They said, we were afraid you were going to go on suicide watch because you were so determined to go free. And everyone kind of made fun of me. People had given up, I think. They didn't think that if you fought really hard that you would ever go free because there wasn't any energy around this. Really, I created a war room in my cell. I had a big calendar up. We kicked off a big letter writing campaign, but the most important part was David France covering my story for Glamour, because you can't really get support if people don't understand what you did, like what's lurking in there. You won't get a politician if they don't really know the case. And back then, now it's more common knowledge, but back then people were like, well, why did you get 24 years? There's more to the story. Everyone always used to say there's more to the story.
Yeah.
So we created packages. We put a copy of the article in there, and other media. We would put letters of those who had already written supporting my clemency, and we would find somebody who lived in every state of the country, just about, and we would ask them, would you write to your senator or your congressman and ask, for support for me, and mail the package. And it was surprisingly, a lot of people supported me just based on that. But the two senators in Arkansas, the more we thought I was gaining momentum, they decided to go talk to the pardon attorney. And when they did, at that time it was Roger Adams, they met with him. And when they left there, they were just like, he wasn't even, asking questions or interested. It was kind of like just sort of, I'm here because I have to be, because you want a meeting, but
there wasn't really any initial interest. Yeah, okay.
And they were concerned. So eventually they talked to President Clinton about my case. And even then, they had trouble because they had asked for my case and it never came over. It never went over to the White House. And I now know, because I've met somebody who used to work at the Office of the Pardon Attorney. He said that the woman who had my case did not like me. She didn't like the press I was getting because it was making DOJ look bad. She had it out for you. And thank God, 60 Minutes actually got involved towards the tail end. Form of commutation of sentence. That's where they say time served. So it's mercy. It basically means mercy, but it can come in the form of a commutation of sentence or a full pardon. Typically, if it's a full pardon, you have already served your time. You're already 5 years off paper, and you can file, and either get a full pardon or clemency in the form of a commutation of sentence. And I got time served. I still had to do probation. So, it's not like they just pop you out, and the public doesn't have to be worried that they're releasing people who are unsupervised, because we still have strict, we have to answer.
With regard to your case, once you're released through clemency, or anyone that's released through clemency, does that kind of like wipe their slate clean, or are they still held with federal charges on their records? And if they are, how does one move forward? Like, what is the process, or adjusting to like civil life after literally just being pulled from your life and what and now you're going back, and family as well, like this is not a one person situation. This is something that affects everybody. Well, no, clemency in the when you get a commutation of sentence, your record it's still there. You can't even, especially when you're on probation, you can't even be in a home that has firearms. My dad had a couple of hunting rifles. He had to literally remove those from the house. So your record still follows you, and you don't get that expunged unless you get a full pardon, which I haven't even applied for yet. Someday I do hope to apply. But. We started the Can Do Foundation. Yes. And from the very beginning when I got out, I got out about 6-7 months before Clinton left office. Okay. So I wanted to start advocating right away for some of the women who were in there, and my roommate was one of them. I had filed her clemency petition while we were roommates, and Glamour came and interviewed me again to show that, post-conviction, the story. So I plugged her story, and
The CAN-DO acronym came to mind. It stands for Clemency for All Nonviolent Drug Offenders. And it became a 501c3 in 2004. And I just keep trying to advocate for justice through clemency for people who are in a similar situation that I was in.
And do you, with the CAN-DO organization, do you focus more towards women, or is it kind of you go for whoever is story and is submitting and has momentum moving direction, or is it, you focus on like the women?
Well, when I applied for 501c3 status, my mission statement was to educate the people, educate the public about the conspiracy law, and to identify cases of conspiracy cases of women who had been ensnared like I had. So and from about 2004 clear up until just a couple of years ago, it was only women. I only had women on the website. But during the Obama Clemency Initiative, Clemency Project 2014, was historic. I understood the magnitude of how historic that was. And there were so many people who had incredible cases who were men that were deserving, that we started adding men to the website. We had a lot of people who were asking us to help, and a lot of lifers. First it was just pot lifers, because I thought, if I open myself up, I'm going to be flooded with so many requests for help. I can't sustain it because I'm a small organization.
Yes.
But I had a lot of volunteers and a guardian angel group.
Which means so individuals can actually become a guardian angel with your organization.
Right.
So they want to be an advocate and support. How would they go about doing that? Because this is something I know they want to know. And we could get some help from you guys. That would be a blessing. We're actually going to share some of the individual stories here today as well that have gained clemency from you, from the organization and your help, and also those that you're working closely with that have large campaigns that are like national masses. So yeah, let's start talking about some of these beautiful women that I've heard about.
Right. Well, we'll start with Alice Johnson. Alice, she's gone viral right now. She's all over the place, and thank God. She was number one because she's a playwright. She was just a mule who passed messages between a buyer and a seller. And when I read everything in her case, and the warden supported her, and all of her accomplishments, first-time offender, serving life, she just really stood out to me as somebody who was the most deserving. Sadly, and I shouldn't say the most deserving, but somebody who just, her resume was just so impressive. Sadly, out of all the women on my original, because I always put a new person in on the top 25 when somebody comes off it, but the original top 25, everybody is out except for 5 people. So 20 of my top 25 are home.
Well, that's a beautiful accomplishment.
Well, but the point being, she was number one. So I just, there's so many of us who are so upset that she got passed over or sidelined, or some hiccup occurred which prevented her from ever making it to President Obama's desk. That's anyone's guess.
And how long has she served to date?
21 years. So 21 years, and her daughter, Tysha, who's beautiful, is about ready. Well, she's pregnant with twins, and her other daughter, Tina, her youngest, is now a grandmother. And this is, to me, a crime in itself. To keep her in prison is to inflict that kind of suffering on somebody should be a crime against humanity.
Yeah.
And
she was. For situations, the conviction, it was non-violent. She's a non-violent, was a non-violent person. She'd never had any priors or any. And
first-time offender serving life without parole.
As if she was caught red-handed doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just
right.
I think that's the part that infuriates me and so many other people that are now becoming more aware.
Yeah.
I think of really how our federal, criminal system is, and just the industrial complex of itself.
Right.
Being a money-making tool.
Right.
But so Miss Alice, we're rooting for you, love.
She's coming out.
She's coming out. And she's got a spirit that is so resilient.
Yeah.
I've spoken to this woman, and it's an amazing energy that I think
She's beautiful.
It's hard to put into words. She's so beautiful.
Yeah, she's a beautiful soul. She's very pure.
Mm-hmm.
She's always putting on the plays, the Christmas play, the Thanksgiving play, the Mother's Day play.
People come from everywhere. They come for her productions. She's amazing.
And her talent. I mean, okay, so she's doing great things in prison. She has earned her right
to be out.
To spend the rest of her life with her children and be happy and move forward. And the warden supported her, other staff, and it's very, very rare now. A warden will rarely ever write. They just don't feel like that's appropriate, because then they know all of the prisoners will start coming to them and saying, well, why won't you write for me? You wrote for so-and-so. But they made an exception for her. It's very rare for a warden to support someone's clemency.
Okay, let's move into this one, because you're wearing
the Free
your
Michelle
words.
West t-shirt. And for good reason. Michelle West is another beautiful soul who, Mikkel is her daughter, who lives here in Los Angeles, where we are based, and has a big following on Instagram because she's a fashion designer. She works for P. Diddy's Revolt TV. She's a dynamo, and her mom went to prison when she was 10.
Wow. And she, has been there for her daughter this whole time. She literally raised her daughter from prison, but she's managed to give her all these life tools that you would expect as somebody being physically present, and it's amazing.
Michelle encouraged her daughter to follow her dream, and she also was very adamant about what do you like, what do you want to do. So she was very hands-on about forcing Mikkel to focus. And Mikkel said, I like fashion. And she said, okay, then let's decide how you're going to make a career. Okay. I'm going to back up. So Mikkel moved to New York, and she caught the eye of the fashion designer for Sex and the City, Tysha.
Something. I know what you're talking about. She's very prominent.
Yes, and she took Mikkel under her wing, and Mikkel has just been on an upward, path ever since, and now is in Los Angeles and has designed clothes for Stevie Wonder, and
she's got an impressive clientele list.
So Michelle, the reason Michelle is dear to my heart is because, like me, the guy who testified against her got full immunity. And he murdered somebody, and he confessed to the murder, but he never served a day. All he had to do was incriminate other people, and she's in there on the word of a murderer who is free.
So let's talk about one more case that is very, very interesting and deals with marijuana, okay? I think this is very important because of where we are in society right now and in our nation. Obviously, California has legalized marijuana, but there are other states, obviously, that have not. So this case is very interesting. I'd like to speak about them a little bit.
Right. Crystal Munoz. She's, number one, she's just a beautiful soul. She's Native American. And she was pregnant. She had one daughter who was about 1 year old. And the DEA came to their door, and this is her husband, Ricky, he's amazing because he's never left her and said he never will while she's doing this time. And they said, we just want to ask you some questions. Would you be willing to come down to their office? And Ricky said, don't go. He just felt bad about this. But Crystal was like, what? I don't have, sure. So they asked her if she would draw a map that would show where all the checkpoints were on the reservation, the Native American reservation, and she knew where the checkpoints were, and so she drew it. Well, come to find out, 3 of her friends who were serving time for marijuana had been incentivized after 3 years in prison to start naming more names, that's what this is all about. It's just a body count. It's about growing the prison industrial complex. It's about slave labor. And so they said that Crystal was the one who had told them where all the checkpoints were, and there again, conspiracy. So
checkpoints for
On a Native American reservation, you have to stop because there's like, I don't know, maybe federal checkpoints.
Okay,
Same thing there would be sort of on a military base. Well, there's also always back roads. So if you wanted, so although there really wasn't much incriminating her saying that she was ever selling marijuana, the people who were in prison were told they could get a sentence reduction if they would testify against Crystal, which they did. She ended up with actually 19 years and I think 11 months, so I just rounded it off to 20 years for pot.
She was pregnant at the time.
She was pregnant. She had her child while she was incarcerated, and they shackled her to the bed because that's the current policy. And I don't think if we're trying to get the whole shackle policy done away with under the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act that Cory Booker and Senator Harris have sponsored, because it's barbaric. Their mother clemency.
So we're still fighting for her.
We're fighting for her. We're fighting for
the stack of. I mean, there's.
We have quite
so
a few
many
that are free, that we were standing out in front of the White House at vigils, holding up their posters and getting media exposure for. We had a lot of victories. 44, I think, that we profiled on our website, received
Since you started?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Not since I started, just during the Obama,
during
the Obama thing. But then there weren't that many clemencies during the Bush administration or, prior to that. So, we still have a lot of work, but the most important thing I feel is what you're doing today, which is talking about the conspiracy law, because I call it the best kept secret in the nation. A lot of people focus on the mandatory minimum as being the culprit as to why we get long sentences, but the public doesn't understand how our time is calculated. So every single one of these stories are women who have been convicted on conspiracy charges. Are serving anywhere from 10 to life.
We have a lot of work to do. What does that entail?
Well, you have to be on Facebook because we communicate inside a private Facebook page. So it's just helpful for us to be able to communicate so everybody sort of knows what's going on. If you're on Facebook, and we assign and pair you with a prisoner that you would be comfortable with. We have several people. So it could be a male or a female. It could be a pot prisoner. It could be a woman who's already served X amount of years. We have cases where their clemency is still pending. So they do have an active clemency petition. And then we want you to start reaching out to your Congress member and asking, I would really like to talk to you about this because I've now learned about something and it concerns me, and I would like for there to be criminal justice reform, and you can bring forward a story or the person that you're advocating for, even when you talk to your Congress member. It's so important. People feel like we don't feel like we have a voice.
Yeah. We don't feel like we have a voice.
You feel like it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Do you know how many Congress members and senators respond when they get quite a few calls of one particular topic, because so many people don't ever even reach out to them and express a view on anything, because we feel
they may be a little bit intimidated too, or maybe I don't know enough legally or the jargon or how to communicate the situation. But that's why we have organizations like this that have a team that can really help you amplify your message and really help someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
We have talking points. We can walk you through so that you feel comfortable. And also there's ways to we have letter writing campaigns, and there's a lot that people can do. Plus just stay in the loop so that they can see through Facebook where we are, what we're doing. We just got back from DC at the Advancing Justice Summit, just met with Senator Harris and talk to her about some issues related to criminal justice reform, so you can kind of see what we're up to.
Okay.
And then if you have an interest, sometimes we can plug you into a project that we're working on, because we always have those going on. So there's no shortage in tasks that we can.
You got a pretty heavy load that you do. And you're also a member or a founder of another organization. What is that organization?
I'm a founding member of the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, and they are growing exponentially. We are becoming a very big organization, and it's a national council, so we are really determined to try to put a spotlight on the inequities of women who sometimes get more time than the main culprit, the shackling issues. We spearheaded the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act that is now has some co-sponsors. We need more senators to co-sponsor that legislation, which we're kind of proud of the fact that as soon as that legislation was announced, the Bureau of Prisons decided to come up with an operations memo where they would give free feminine hygiene to the women. So they gave a press release that they would start supplying some feminine hygiene.
Wait, this was recent?
Yes. Because women have to buy their tampons and panty liners. They're only given these elephant-sized pads and only a few of them, and if they need any more, they have to buy them on commissary at ridiculous prices.
Ridiculous prices. So not only you're serving time, but also now it seems like you're a woman. You're being held like ostracized because you have what's natural for you to create life, and they don't supply that for you. So now the families that are supporting and holding up their family member for something that they didn't do are now having to accommodate monetarily. I mean, everything costs in this complex. Let's just say that everything costs. So it's not just affecting the person that is incarcerated, it's also affecting their family, and or maybe those that don't even have family or have the support. What they make per hour, even on for a wage for working, is it's ridiculous.
Slave labor.
It's slave labor. It's ridiculous. It really devalues like the human spirit and just our place here as a being. So I think that alone is wow, that ruffles my feathers a lot to know that.
It should.
There's no support in that. And this is 2000, so this means women that have been, in prison for years were not getting that support. And now they're making, by the way.
Well, we did a survey, and although the Bureau of Prisons got some positive press for that operations menu, 3 months in, we have found that the majority of the prisons aren't even complying with their own operations memo, and they are not giving these products. They keep saying, we've ordered them, they're in the warehouse, we'll get, next week, next month. So some media did focus on it because most of these people are coming back out into the community.
Yes.
Whether you like it or not, they're coming back out into the community, and we would rather have them mentally sound and rehabilitated instead of more damaged and bitter and incapable of functioning in society.
Yeah.
So there's tons of layers of issues that we're still unraveling with regard to the array of issues that mass incarceration has caused. I was wondering why my husband, then husband, now ex-husband, when he cooperated, they had the kingpin. So the conspiracy was over. They had him, they had the number 2 in command, in custody. So I just kept wondering, why do they still keep pursuing me? I mean, what's going on here? Yeah. And when I got to prison, I found what the answer was, and that's when we were in orientation. Because I'm sitting there in shock. Why did I get 24 years? And when I was sort of on the tail end of this and collected money that wasn't all kosher, and that was my participation. So they have, during orientation, they have somebody come in there that explains how this will work in education, how food service works, and then they came in and they said, ladies, and the guy was so excited and animated, and he said, we hope that you will come and work at Unicor. and we're going to start you off at 23 cents an hour. And we have a cut and sew factory, we have a furniture factory, we have automated data processing, they have call centers, and he was so thrilled. And then he went on to say, we profit over $1 million a month at Unicor, and we're on the Dun and Bradstreet. People can buy stock in this. And I mean, he's
giving you all this.
He's telling all it, and I'm just sitting there going, oh, okay, now I know. Now I get it. Now I understand. This is slave labor. And it all came to me where I was just like, oh, well, now I get it. Now, this is a body count, and it's 100% a
Corporate body count. Yeah.
It's only going to get worse, too, because the private prison industry that was ushered into this country in the 90s that's taking over all these facilities. You may have read, they were just in Miami on President Trump's golf course and spent a ton of money on their annual conference. And you have to, in their contracts, it says you have to keep the prison facility that they own
certain percentage full,
90% full. So if crime drops
90%,
or if we legalize marijuana and 700,000 people get arrested for marijuana each year, they can sue the city if they're not complying with the 90% capacity. So what do you think is going to happen? Those law enforcement people are put under pressure by their bosses.
They go into their conviction rates, and they keep their numbers. Yeah, and that is a by any means necessary situation.
Seems to be.
Wow, Amy.
No, it's awful. We're in a mess.
We're in a little bit of a pickle. As my grandma would say, it's a little bit of a pickle. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today to share this information, your story, and your organization. I definitely am so honored to have you here. And I think my audience is definitely pleased with getting the information that they have now. You've literally given us the information, the scenario, and the legal terms that we can now make an informative, educated decision. We can no longer say we don't know. This is not the only information that's been given or pushed out to the media. I'm sure if you guys are paying attention to the awareness that we're causing, and Studio 3 Hollywood Conversations with Tysha wants to be one of them. So thank you guys for listening. Peace and love.
Here.
First and many.
Shut up!